I recently stumbled across some thoughts from a one Dr. W. Elliot Bulmer, who in his Twitter bio bills himself as Global Research, Policy Advice, Advocacy and Education on Democracy, Constitutions, Good Governance and Strong Institutions. Dr. Bulmer had recently posted his thoughts on Brexit in a thread on twitter.com, and as you might imagine from an urban elitist, he isn't exactly in favour. I thought we might go through them carefully and thoughtfully to see what assumptions he's made and why I think he is wrong. So he begins by saying, quote, "The reason Brexit can be so easily turned into a culture war issue rather than a pragmatic conversation about trade and economics is that Brexiteers don't care if they can't get affordable manchego, halloumi, sarkusi sichi or jamon iberico, probably all pronounced wrong. They mostly eat beans on toast." Well, I haven't seen any data on the most common kinds of foods that Brexiteers consume, but let's assume for the sake of argument that he's correct. Brexit was widely supported by the working class of Britain because of the natural English instinct for self-governance. I don't know that Brexiteers don't care about access to fancy foreign foods, but I do know that Brexiteers care first and foremost about the sovereignty of their country, as the Lord Ashcroft post-Brexit polling makes very clear. The reasons for leaving the EU were consistent among the major parties. Nearly half of Leave voters said the biggest single reason for wanting to leave the EU was, quote, the principle that decisions about the UK should be taken in the UK. 1/3 said that the main reason that was leaving, quote, offered the best chance for the UK to regain control over immigration and its own borders, and just over 1 in 8 said that remaining would mean having no choice about, quote, how the EU expanded its membership or its powers in the years ahead. Only just over 1 in 20 said that their main reason was that, quote, when it comes to trade and the economy, the UK would benefit more from being outside of the EU than being a part of it. To just 6% of Leave voters, the issue was about a pragmatic conversation about trade and economics, as Dr. Bulmer is considering the issue. The primary driving force behind over 3/4 of Leave voters were issues that stem from English cultural issues, where decisions about the country are made and on the impact of immigration on England. These are culture war issues. So why would Dr. Bulmer ignore the primary concern of the overwhelming majority and focus on a very minor section of the Leave vote? Why should Leave voters not be allowed to hold cultural concerns over economic ones? He continues with, that is interpreted as a mark of disrespect, but it's not. It's just a social and cultural reality. I reckon I could, with reasonable accuracy, pick out either whether someone is for or against Brexit by what they'd help themselves to at a hotel's breakfast buffet. Quite possibly. There is certainly a class dynamic at play, and for most of the voters of this country, access to a hoity-toity lifestyle isn't as important as knowing that the decisions on Britain's future are being made in Britain. Notice how unselfish the Brexiteer position is. They are considering themselves the inheritors of a country that they hold in trust for future generations, and are making decisions based on that understanding that we are part of a civilizational continuum, instead of the deeply self-centered position of Dr. Bulmer's upper-middle-class compadres who think only of their own gastronomic pleasure and consumptive satisfaction. How petty and selfish his chosen cohort seems by comparison. They are willing to give up our decision-making powers as a country in order to ensure that they have some access to fancy foreign foods. What a short-sighted way to look at the world. He continues, in the same way, I've never met anyone who could, for example, read a simple newspaper article in French or indicate the position of Berlin on an unmarked map who supports Brexit. Those who do support it do so in part because, to them, Europe is foreign, unknown, and dangerous. Well, I couldn't read a French newspaper, but I could mark Berlin on a map, but then I spent 8 years of my life living in Germany and not in France. One thing I noticed when I was a member of UKIP is that a great number of them had spent a significant amount of time living abroad. Many of them had direct experience of foreign cultures, and this sharpened their appreciation for Britain's native culture. It wasn't because they viewed Britain as small or insular that they wanted to protect it from the homogenizing force of the EU. It's because it was unique and precious, and they wanted to ensure that that special character of the country would be preserved for their children to enjoy as they themselves had done. But Dr. Bulmer adds to this, quote, They don't see an isolated, monolingual, monocultural, beige food Britain as a threat to their way of life or standard of living, because they already live in an isolated, monolingual, monocultural, beige food Britain, and they like it that way. Yes, we do. We like Britain to be British, and we appreciate the aesthetic qualities of the country we cherish. There is nothing to stop people like Dr. Bulmer from roaming the globe and indulging his fancy for foreign foods in foreign countries. Again, many of the people who campaigned for Brexit have done just that. But when we have eaten our fill from the buffet of the world, we'd like to return back to a place that feels like home. And that means for a Britain to feel like the Britain of our childhoods, which incidentally, the Britain that the pro-immigration, pro-EU technocrats are doing their best to erase because of their elite consumptive prejudices. You don't have to like it, Dr. Bulmer. You can always leave any time you like. He adds, every response to this thread so far has just confirmed my original point. It is very easy to turn Brexit, which is really a strategic trading and economic decision, into a culture war issue. And it cuts both ways. Accusations of being snobbish only reinforce that observation. But that's the crux of this issue, isn't it, Dr. Bulmer? Brexit is not really an economic issue at all to 94% of leavers, and is indeed a cultural issue and one that is very close to their hearts. They wanted to ensure that the country they inherited was in a fit state to be passed down to future generations. They did not merely want to be Province 17 of the bureaucratic European superstate. There is something magical about this country, as any foreign visitor will tell you, which is presumably why they come to visit in the first place, and it's hard to pretend that the continuous, over 1,000-year histories of England, Scotland and Wales aren't the inheritance of the British people. A lot has happened here, and it is up to us to maintain it as we found it, not to have it transformed into a geometric set of grid lines on your systematically organised map of the world. We want Britain to retain its British character. We're proud of our country, we're proud of its institutions, and we're proud of its people. We have done great things in the world, and doubtless will do in future. But Dr. Bulmer finishes with, the thread is not about who is superior. It is about the extent to which one lives, culturally and gastronomically, in a European Britain or an insular Britain. Losing the European dimension and embracing insularity is no loss to those who are already insular, that's it. And that's correct. It is no loss. Britain had, in previous eras, always felt like a small and decent place, where people could live out lives of relative safety with the assurance that things were properly ordered to the liking of the natives. This order was upended when we joined the European Union, and Brexit is a restoration of that state of affairs. It is right that decisions about Britain are taken in Britain, and it is wrong that they are taken elsewhere. The British view on how the state should respond to the people demands it, and they have rightfully done their part in ensuring that this sceptred isle can continue as an independent country long after the latest European boondoggle has collapsed into chaos and blood-soaked anarchy like all previous attempts at a European superstate have in the past. We can see the future because we are in close contact with our past, Dr. Bulmer. We can see that the people who think they know more than they do and what they're up to, and we can feel in our guts that this road is going to end in misery as it has so many times before. And when given the chance to avoid this inevitable fate, we decided to do the right thing and get ourselves out while we still could. All of this is to the credit of the isolated, monolingual, monocultural, beige food-eating Brits. It is a demonstration of the virtue of their inherited wisdom and their ancient traditions. If you were to focus a little less on what you put in your mouth and a little more on what happens after you're dead, you might find yourself a little less resentful of this outcome. We have something worth cherishing here, and it's our job to hold it in trust for those who come after us. Sometimes that means making the hard decisions now.